What do you mean live streaming isn't available right now? What does that mean? YouTube, what are you doing? Oh, it says I'm right there. What are you doing, YouTube? I can just see Kim said hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. Let me discreetly finish my balsamic vinegar tofu. I could not explain why I like this. I mean, I never really liked tofu, and then I found if I pressed extra firm tofu, it tastes like, given I haven't had cheese in like 3 years, so I don't know, but it tastes like kind of vaguely of mozzarella, and so I use it for like caprese stuff or like Italian things that would call for mozzarella. So yeah, have a little snack. Accidental mukbang. Yeah, I know tofu's not for everyone. I definitely really like just extra firm tofu. I've always wanted to try to make it into a smoothie, but I've never managed that yet. Hello from Europe at 3 a.m. Where's our 3 a.m. Europe crowd? How we doing? I know there's a couple of you. Troopers. Do you still have $30 Patreon tier? Actually, that's a great question. That is a great question. Oh. I don't know what that was. Just ping. Let me get a link for you. Because I do, if you're referring to the chats, it's a very long story. Patreon is weird. Patreon is weird. So to make a very long story short, because I don't want to seem like I'm moaning about anything, essentially what happened is like 8 months ago, I got this really dramatic email from Patreon that was like, as a not safe for work content creator, you cannot have these sort of perks. And so you need to get rid of this immediately, or we'll basically chuck your Patreon in the bin. You know, they were gonna like remove my Patreon for like terms of service violations because I had one-on-one chats, which I didn't realize this. Apparently that counts as a customized reward, which is not allowed for not safe for work content creators because they basically don't want you to use it to make porn. It's very confusing. So what I had to do is I had to create a second safe for work Patreon account that is just for one-on-one chats. I believe all of my slots are full. However, if what you're looking for is a chat, I can add an extra slot. So my business email should be down below. Let me double check that so you can email me later. But actually, if you go to any of my videos, my business email is on there on my account page. Send me an email. Let me know you want like an additional slot because I definitely have time for more chats, and I will add an extra slot so that way you can sign up for that. But yeah, that is how you guys, if you want to do like one-on-one chats with me, I offer hour and half an hour, like once per month spots, and then we can hang out. And I get people from all over the world. I have people I talk to from Australia, Germany, the UK, France, Canada, the US, East Coast, West Coast, just all over. It's super, super fun. It's one of my favorite things that I do because then I get to know you guys. Sometimes we just hang out and we talk about news and other things. Other times, you know, just very on the ball, specific questions, that kind of stuff. So you get to make whatever it is that you want. Also, I wore makeup today. That doesn't always happen during these live streams. Can we just have a moment of silence for my eyelashes? Because I was very excited. I was trying a new brand of eyelashes that actually Bailey Sarian, who's another big YouTuber who does like, she does this like thing called Murder Mystery Makeup Mondays, and I always loved her eyelashes, and so I bought some of the eyelashes that she wore during one of her videos, like false eyelashes. I cut the inside corner instead of the outside corner by accident because I thought I was cutting for the left eye. I thought I was cutting the pair for the right eye, and I've permanently messed them up, so now they're no longer usable. So I'm gonna have to buy another pair. I have another pair from that same brand that I've used for like 3 or 4 videos in a row. They hold up so well. They look super amazing. That could also be that I'm getting better at putting on false eyelashes because I've only been doing this for like I don't know. I've only done it like half a dozen times, so I'm really not that good at it yet. But anyways, that's my update. Do you guys like my shirt? I forgot I owned this. It's like a Shibari t-shirt. I don't remember where I got this from. I think I got it. It was like on sale. I think there's like a hole in the back or something, which I always planned if this got like really holy, like at the hole in the back, like just like I was going to make it like a really cool, like distressed t-shirt. Like maybe I would cut the back and I do the thing where you cut holes in the shirt and you like weave and tie them together. I thought that could be cool because of like the Shibari theme. Anyways, I'm rambling today thanks to the power of balsamic tofu. Its obvious influential effects. Anyways, yes, thank you guys so much. I'm super glad that you're here. Why is my chat not updating on YouTube? As I can see you guys are making comments on Restream, but not on YouTube. What is going on here? Brittany, if nobody has messaged you about the Patreon thing, you're probably fine. I think that happened because somebody reported me because apparently Patreon thought I was like making pornography, and I was like, literally that's like the opposite of what I do. Like if anything, I try to make it obvious that BDSM is not always like what you see in porn. So I thought that was really funny. But the person I worked with at Patreon, like normally Patreon support is really nice. God, the person I was working with was such an asshole. Like I was like, I can show you evidence that this isn't the kind of content I'm making. I'm only doing not safe for work because I want to make sure people that sign up are above the age of 18 because like I don't want to talk to minors, and like it was a whole thing. It was a whole big deal. All right. Let's go. So we've been rambling for a little bit, so I guess I should clarify a few things. That way people know what is going on. So we do have sort of a theme for the live stream, and it's not really a theme. It's like just a suggested topic, something that I thought would be fun to discuss with all of you and like get your opinions about. So I thought we could talk about like navigating like disclosure and negotiations, because I'm working on a video for that right now, and I would be really interested to see what different people think about like, hey, you know, how do you talk to a partner when you're dealing with like a physical disability or you have a mental illness? Like, how do you navigate that? Because obviously I do not have every experience in the world when it comes to that area. So I was really hoping maybe we could talk about that, share some personal experience. Maybe what do you do as far as that's concerned? But otherwise, you know, in general. Oh, thank you so much, Cardi Wolf.
Cardi Wolf donated $5. Hi, Evie. I really appreciate your input to my question in the last stream. I feel like I can lean into my submission more but have some trust issues with authority figures to work. You're awesome. Thank you much.
Oh, yeah, I totally remember your question. I'm so glad that I was able to help with that. And yeah, I mean, kink is definitely a process. And I think, you know, regardless of where you're starting from when you get into BDSM, I think pretty much everyone I know has discovered some kind of like mental roadblock before they can fully get into the BDSM that they want to have, like the BDSM relationships they want to have, whether that be, you know, feeling self-conscious about your body, or not feeling confident in your skills as a dom, or working through trauma, not being able to trust authority figures, not being able to articulate your emotions, not having a robust set of values and boundaries. Like there's always going to be something, I think, that through the process of kink, we like discover, oh, that's like a thing we need to work on. Okay, great. Now we can identify it and we can work through it. And not only will that improve your kink experience, I think a lot of times that will also improve just your everyday, even like vanilla relationships and interactions. So yeah, great. Super happy to help. Now, I was partway through my little spiel, so big thing to keep in mind, 18 plus only. Please read the rules. I have a full like list of rules linked down below that you can check out. Just some basic guidelines to be aware of. Please no politics. Please no health advice. If somebody does ask a question like, help, I have this wound and it's been oozing for 3 days. What do I do? That person should go to a doctor. Not ask a random internet stranger, which is functionally what I am. So if you're asking for health advice, I can't really get into that. I don't think it's ethical to do that. I will simply redirect you to appropriate resources, which is probably going to be like, hey, see a professional. more or less. Other than that, just keep it civil. Keep it nice. We're going to have a fun time. And though we do have sort of a general topic I thought we could discuss, this is a general Q&A. So any questions you have for me, about me, things you want to talk about, help with your kink relationship, general queries, we're here to discuss that and have a fun time. All right. Before we get into it, I am going to turn off my heater. Because why don't I even have my wall heater on? I don't know. We're going to fix that. All right, wall heater removed. I don't know. I just really like it when it's very warm. And it was warm for like, I don't know. It was warm for like a week probably here. Like we had a couple really good days where it was in the low 70s. And then ever since then, it went back down to the 50s and 60s. And so I like to kind of maintain my room temperature to be fairly warm because I am secretly a reptile and I need to be kept in, what is it? What are the reptile like cages called? It's just a vivarium. I never owned a reptile, so I don't know. But I need a warm vivarium. I think that's what it is. Not too hot, like not like 80 degrees by any means, but like, nice warm ambient temperature. Tofu smoothie? Oh, so no, what you do is I guess you could do soy milk. Usually, like a smoothie that has tofu in it, it's that very, very light, like extra silky tofu. And that is like what helps it get its like creamy richness, essentially, instead of like, a banana or something like that. Although we could obviously do a mix with bananas. I don't know because I haven't made one yet. Oh, did you like the conditioner? I did, Kelby. Thank you so much for it, by the way. I wasn't sure how to, like, send a thank you note for that. I actually used it 2 days ago, right before I dyed my hair, because I re-dyed it last night. I got a new hair dye. I don't think I left it in for quite long enough, because I followed the instructions for, like, the root touch-up instead of, like, a full re-dye. And it was supposed to be, like a deep blue black, but I really feel like it's just sort of a neutral black. Like you can tell like on my roots here, like actually kind of left red instead of blue, which is weird. So I was not super happy with the results of the hair dye, but I was happy with the results of the conditioner. So thank you so much. Actually, I just got in the mail a brand called Pacifica had a 50% off their last call sale. So I literally got some new hair masks and some new face masks. Like I got like 3 each of like 2 different things, and I paid like $10 for like a solid several months of like self-care aftercare stuff. So I feel really good about that. We love a sale. Why pay full price for anything? That's my philosophy. Looking for a question. I haven't a clue about fake eyelashes, something I do want to learn. False eyelashes, that was like the last bastion of like makeup thing that I didn't understand. Like it was always very intimidating to me. I had tried it once or twice, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm just like totally inept. I'll just stick with doing my big eyeliner and just go with mascara. But once I found like, I really like and I think these are technically considered more advanced, but I much prefer the look of the very flexible bands that are clear instead of having like a really thick dark band. And that plus the eyelash glue like makes so much difference, because I was buying like the duo glue that everybody recommends, and I tried like 3 or 4 different kinds, and then I returned them to Ulta and be like, this didn't work. And I got I think it's the Kiss brand lash adhesive, that, and then like finding styles of lashes I like, because I think before I wasn't trimming them, and like I do have like a little bit smaller eyes, so usually I have to trim like at least the first like little clump of lashes. If you've looked at false lashes, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I probably sound crazy. But trim the shape of the eye, like your actual eye size instead of just trying to glue them directly on. But a lot of people also like magnetic lashes. I've never used them before because I want to use my own eyeliner that I like using. But if you're struggling with putting on false lashes and that's like a look you really want to try, I think that magnetic lashes are also a good way to go because like there's a ton of even like drugstore brands now that are making magnetic lashes. Like I think Ardell has some, or Kiss, one of those two brands. So like literally you can even go to like a CVS or a Walgreens or something and like get magnetic lashes to try. So it's much more accessible than it used to be. And once I think I live streamed it the first time I put on false eyelashes successfully, and like my brain just exploded. I was like, oh, the makeup world is my oyster. Well, thank you for hanging out, Brittany. Oh, yeah, you probably have to go to bed soon. It's later there. Well, have a good sleep. Talk to you soon. Not safe for work. What are people watching Patreon content at work? You know, I am sure there are people that do that. I think what they like, it's funny because like not safe for work has like evolved in this very interesting direction where like it doesn't literally mean not safe for the workplace anymore. It just means adult content. And because I was making stuff that was kink related, and you know, I still am making stuff that's kink related, I think by default that's assumed to be not safe for work. And you know, I always wanted it to be that way because like I don't want 12-year-olds to watch my Patreon content. I don't want to have a video conference call with a 12-year-old. Like, you know, so that all makes sense to me. But it is funny how the classification itself has evolved in that particular direction. Oh, that's awesome. Mr. Beansman said, "Hi, Evie. I came out as kinky to some vanilla friends, and they were really receptive and supportive." That's awesome. Congratulations. I know I don't really have vanilla friends, but if I did, like, I know that's really hard to have to be like, oh, do I tell my friends? Do I keep this secret? What if they think I'm weird? Like, I know the problem that a couple people have run into is like people can almost be too supportive because they almost kind of end up like living vicariously through your kinkiness, where suddenly they want all the details, they want to hear about all the dungeons and everything. So like make sure if it does kind of go in that direction, like set good boundaries with your friends and be like, hey, I'm super happy to like share my life. I'm glad we can talk about this, but get a little too invasive. You just tell them like it is. Tell them like it is. Don't be scared. Oh yeah, you like my headboard? Here, I'll try to. There you go. You guys can see it. Yeah, it's not technically a headboard. It's a tapestry that has lights on it. But I guess from the way it's sort of zoomed out, it could look that way. I really like it though. It's definitely my like favorite part of this room is this whole business. Some people are saying terrarium and some people are saying vivarium, and I don't know which is correct. Oh, what is your favorite brand of non-dairy ice cream? Oh, that's a really interesting one because it's like what like there's I mean like probably my favorite like one I've tried is I like the non-dairy Ben and Jerry's ice cream as like a treat. But if I want something that's not 800 calories for a pint, I like the Arctic Zero pistachio flavor is the only non-dairy pistachio flavor I can find. And I love pistachio. I feel like America does not take enough advantage of pistachio flavored pudding, cake, everything. I love it. One of my favorite flavors. And that is probably my favorite one. I also really like there's like a local brand that also makes non-dairy stuff, but like obviously if you don't live where I live, you're not going to be able to find it. But probably like, you know, in terms of ease of access plus like flavor quality, like Ben and Jerry's is probably the easiest to get. I did really like the Halo Top vegan flavors, but I haven't been able to find them in stores anymore. I think they reformulated. So I don't know if they're going to start coming back or what, but like the only place I could find them was like Target, and they had like one flavor and I was like, what? It was like the candy bar flavor, one of the ones I didn't like, so womp womp womp. They used to have a chocolate banana flavor I really liked. Okay, we got some questions for new people. I don't know if the find more partners question is like a question or if that's a response to something. It feels like maybe it might be part of something else that I'm not seeing. But do you have any advice for newly polyamorous people? So that really depends on like what kind of poly you want to practice. Are you doing solo poly? It sounds like newly polyamorous people maybe indicates like, I don't know this for sure, but are you like part of an existing couple that was monogamous before and is now going poly? Or are you like trying to find a relationship where you start from like the ground floor as being poly? Because I think those are two slightly different situations. I think the best thing that two like key ideas that are like quick little thoughts to like keep in your brain to sort of remind yourself of occasionally. One is the people in the relationship are more important than the relationship. This is particularly important if you're getting into polyamory with somebody that you were monogamous with, and then one of you ends up finding out that like you're really more comfortable with monogamy and you want to go back in that direction. There are ways to make mono poly, so a relationship where one person is monogamous and one person is poly. You can make that work so long as the person's preference for monogamy isn't super strong. So like if one, like on a scale, if like one is like hardcore, entirely monogamous, has only ever had sex with one person in their life ever, and 10 is like fully poly, lives on a commune with like 20 people and they're in like a casual relationship with everybody, like they need to be at the point of monogamy where like they need to be like a 4 instead of a 2. So like if they're at the point where like polyamory like secretly like kind of disgusts them a little bit and they don't really kind of understand why people would be poly, that's not really going to work long term. So just like be honest with yourself and with the people that you get into partnerships with when things are really working or not, because it's not worth it to keep suffering for months, for years, even longer with a relationship that doesn't really work just because you want to have the relationship. Because remember, especially if you are pursuing polyamory, there's a lot more opportunity to change the relationship in a way that better fits the reality of the dynamic that you have with that person. So if you, for example, find out that like you're not really sexually attracted to a person, like you don't have to cut them out of your life entirely. Maybe you're better suited as being friends. Or maybe you really like having sex with somebody, but like you don't really connect romantically, or your life paths are just totally different. Like they want to travel the world and, you know, see 20 countries in 10 years and you want to settle down and have kids. Like you can still be like occasional fuck buddies. Like you can navigate how to change stuff to actually make the relationship work in the way that makes sense for the people. But you don't have to hold on to this idea of having like, well, I need to have an exclusive monogamous sexual romantic relationship with this person, otherwise we will never have contact again. Like you can navigate how to make that a little bit more workable in poly, and so you don't have to lose somebody from your life necessarily. So keep that in mind. And then again, you don't want to make two people miserable when something really isn't working. So first piece of advice is remember that the people in the relationship are more important than the relationship. Second piece of advice is remember to treat people as individual people with their own needs, wants, and goals for a relationship. I think it is really easy, particularly if you are a couple getting into poly, to basically be like, we have an almost complete puzzle. We need one more piece, and we have to find the exact person that is going to be the last piece for our puzzle. Because although I think that's well-intentioned, because, you know, it comes from a place of wanting to meet somebody that's going to work for your dynamic, that you're going to get along with, that you'll have shared interests with. That's kind of treating people as, you know, need fulfillers. Like for you, like I'm trying to find somebody that's going to meet all these needs and slot into my life and this existing relationship in this very particular way. And it doesn't really leave a lot of room for like the individual person to be an individual person. So be really careful with the way that you interact with people. Like don't just have it be something where you're trying to make somebody fit a very particular mold. Like you got to leave some space for that person to be their own person and have their own needs, wants, requirements, goals for the relationship as well, because that's probably the biggest mistake I see new poly people make is they create a very particular idea of like, this is the exact partner I want, and trying to squish people into being that. And that just like doesn't work. We don't, at least to my knowledge anyways, have a like build your own perfect partner kit, like polyamorous edition that you can just whip out and like make an ideal person with. If that ever did exist, the implications would be scary. But we don't have that, so we gotta leave room for people to want what they want for themselves as well. And if you are getting into a scenario where like where you're doing like sort of the, I've talked about this before on live streams, but if you're getting into the point where you're like, I'm trying to find a third for our relationship and you have to date us both and love us both equally, like that's super not gonna work. You know, and not like it never happens, but the expectation doesn't match up with the probability in reality. It's very difficult for two people to get along in a relationship, you know, for an extended period of time, let alone finding a third person that will fall in love with both of you around the same time, to the same intensity, and be able to spend time with both of you as a couple as well as individually equally. Like that's, you know, that is very much a needle in a haystack scenario there. So trying to have that as like the only way you want to have poly is, again, I think going to set people up for failure. So that is my poly advice. Hopefully that helped you out. If you have additional questions, feel free to ask. Now, do keep in mind that if you want to make sure I answer a question, the best way to do that is with a super chat. You can do a super chat through YouTube, or if you heard the little voiceover from earlier, there is a link to Streamlabs down below. So if you want to check out Streamlabs, that is often a better way to do super chats because it does a voiceover and YouTube doesn't take 30% of the revenue, which is what they do with the YouTube super chats. And also it contributes automatically to our goal, which is above my face currently. So I do try to get to all the questions, but I do usually run out of time. Unfortunately, I wish I could get to everybody every week, but usually there are more questions because, as we can tell, I like to ramble. I feel like I should change the title of the live stream. I don't know if that seems obnoxious or not. I just have this, I'm like, I feel like we're going in a different direction. I want to make sure people know what we're doing. So I might do that, but in the meantime, I will answer this question, which is, what are some pet play scenes for someone just getting into pet play? And this is interesting because I'm going to call this one, I'm going to change the title to Advice for Newbies, Disclosure, and Viewer Q&A. Also, by the way, if you like the live streams, make sure to give them a thumbs up. And if you want to make sure not to miss them, if you go to the notification bell on YouTube, make sure you have all turned on, because I've heard from people that for my channel in particular, like they don't get notifications. I do pretty much always, you know, there's circumstances where maybe I won't stream, but it's almost always Fridays, 6 p.m. Pacific time. And so that's 9 for the East Coast and apparently 3 a.m. in Europe. So there you go. All right. Back to the question. So I'm just going to give some like general answers that I think work for several different types of pet play. But if you have a particular pet in mind that you want to do something with, then I can also give like more like stuff that's geared towards whatever pet that is. So I think stuff that's like really easy to get into that I think is really fun for getting into a headspace would be things like trick training, right? So like learning how to sit, learning how to stand up, you know, stay, things like that. I think that can be really rewarding and offers a lot of opportunities for interaction. I also really like doing things that, for example, involve like using a cage, because that might be something that you already are familiar with from other forms of BDSM, being in bondage, etc. So I think whether that's, you know, a puppy that's being crate trained, or a horse that is being put into like a trailer, or trying to wrestle a bratty kitten player into like a cat carrier to go to the vet, or putting a bird in a bird cage. Like there are lots of opportunities to do variations on that depending on what animal you're kind of trying to go for. And it is also helpful for, I think, kind of maybe discovering what pet you might be drawn to based on your reactions to certain things as well. So this is also kind of like a sampler opportunity to kind of figure out what speaks to you and what doesn't, because, you know, if you're going maybe more in a puppy direction, you might be super treat and pet motivated. You might, or like pets, like as in like physical, not like other pets, but like, you know, physical affection, I guess, more generally motivated. When you're in a cage, you might like feel really sleepy and want to take a nap. You might really like playing with toys. You might like feel really like fixated on your partner, like when you're doing training stuff. If you're more like maybe on the cat side of the spectrum, maybe you're super picky about treats and you don't like any of them except for like the really, really high value stuff. You might hate the idea of being put in a cage. You might really like climbing all over things. You might be really bratty towards your partner and like really, really hard to get to obey. So, and of course, you know, there's always individual variation. Those are kind of stereotypes, but kind of staying in tune with yourself when you're doing those beginner scenes, if you don't know what kind of pet you want to be, can also be helpful. As far as other scenes go, I think it can also be really fun. See, I talked about caging. I talked about like trick training and treats. I'm trying to think of what else would be like really general that would apply to like most different types of pets. I mean, there's very general, just like playing with toys, right? Like just getting a bunch of toys on the ground and then interacting with your partner with them. That could be a laser pointer. That could be like a feather on a string. That could be, one of those like dog puzzle toys where they have to solve the puzzle to get to a treat inside. That could be throwing a tennis ball. That could be, playing tug of war. Things like that can also be really fun. And again, I think are general because like most animals play with some kind of toy, right? Whether that be, a laser pointer, a cuttlefish bone, tennis ball, like there's going to be some variation on there you can do with most different types of animals. So that's kind of my very base level general suggestions for most types of pets. But again, like I said, if you do have something in particular you want to explore, I can give more advice that's like keyed into a particular animal. All right, let's see. Next question. Where'd my live stream chat go? Let's pop out the chat. Okay. Oh gosh, I've lost so much of the chat. All right, let me scroll down. Okay. It can be called either a vivarium or a terrarium, so both are right. Oh, the more I know. I will be prepared when the next time a pub quiz happens involving how to take care of reptiles. What's really interesting? So, just briefly, I want to put this out there because I wonder if anybody else is going through this with their local community. Earlier today, our governor announced that we are going to be fully open as a state on June 30th. And I have not heard anything from any of my local community organizations about what they're doing. And I've asked people, I'm like, hey, what's the plan? Are parties going to happen again? Who's organizing stuff? Are we still going to require masks because things are probably going to be inside? Is the yearly camping trip in July going to happen? Like, what's going on? Been complete radio silence. I have no idea what's going on. So I'm curious. I don't know, as far as reopening goes, I'd be curious to hear, like, how have people's communities handled that? Are you still, like, fully locked down? Are things kind of coming back pretty slowly? Have dungeons stayed around? Like, did some of them go out of business, essentially? Are there new ones popping up? Because this is something I think is, like, so variable across, just depending on where you live, just across the country. I think everybody's having a very unique experience of, all of that kind of happening, especially after so long. Like, oh my gosh, it's been so long. So, I just want to know, because I've heard from people that are starting to go back to parties. I know a couple of people actually. I've had two people I've talked to recently where I think one of them went to their first party last weekend, and I know another person that their first party is like tonight. So if that's you, congratulations. I know you've probably been waiting for a really long time to get back out there and finally get to actually do the BDSM thing a little bit. So congrats on that. All right, next question, because that was not a question, that was me rambling. I should also add that the place where I live has like the highest vaccination, one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. And also, from my understanding, is if things are going to open back up again, it would be required. Like, you'd have to have proof of having full dosage of the vaccine. But I don't know, because nobody said shit about shit yet. So I am guessing. And depending on what their answers are, it will affect my honestly, the only thing I want to do, I just want to be able to go to an outdoor munch. I just want to be able to meet with some people on a veranda somewhere, get a vegan cupcake, maybe get a nice iced tea, just hang out outside and be like, hello, fellow humans, which is saying a lot for me. That's saying a lot for me. Oh, so Gabby said, Evie, you have been such an integral part of finding out who I am, especially regarding sexual expression. Your channel is something I binge watch. Keep up the good work, is really appreciated. Well, thank you so much, Gabby. That's part of the reason why I started this channel, is I kind of almost wanted to give back to YouTube in this weird way, because, I went to high school in a state that essentially had a variation on abstinence only education. And so, like, my education about sexuality was like, look at these horrifying pictures of STDs. You will literally get AIDS the second you have sex. Like, it was not good. And the only reason I kind of figured out, more about human sexuality and relationships and stuff like that, and really, got started in my own journey, was through watching YouTube videos. And those led me to other resources, which led me to kink. And it was a really, really rewarding experience, I think, to have that. And if I can help somebody in the way that ye olde YouTube channels help me, that just is like, yes, I have saved one more person from the horrible reality of the American / other countries' sex ed systems. Although I know other places are generally better than the US, but they're not talking about kink, that's for sure. Maybe in Germany or somewhere. I feel like those places are fairly progressive as far as kink's concerned. Okay. Ooh, great question from Noah. If that's how I think it's Noah. N-O-A. Noah Newman. Love that name, by the way. We love the continents. How do you help a shy dom come out of their shell? My partner is a little inexperienced IRL, and I'm hoping to get to see them when it's safer. Okay, great question. I think, actually, you know what? This is a weird recommendation. I watched a great video earlier today from Thought Slime, which is like a political YouTube channel, totally different from what I do. But they've kind of pivoted their content recently, so they're doing kind of more general stuff. And they put out a really funny video that was talking about like a guide to dating. And I think there's a really great section in there that talks about like confidence and like cultivating confidence. And I feel like, there's this sort of tension that exists where I think, a lot of people in the BDSM community come from kind of like nerd backgrounds. They're kind of introverted. They're shy, and obviously when you don't have experience with kink, like you're gonna be nervous about like messing it up, right? And so we expect doms to be very confident and in control, but with a new dom, that confidence obviously hasn't been developed yet. And I think, if you're coming at it from a submissive perspective and you want to really stay in that power exchange, I think there's sort of a way to almost like lead by example, by like demonstrating your vulnerability and then like asking them to return that vulnerability, and kind of like taking your first steps, but then like inviting your partner to like take that step with you. So I don't know how this shyness like manifests. So I don't know if that's reluctance to talk about their kink interest. I don't know if that's being nervous about going to public play parties. I don't know if that's nervousness about having like a physical real life scene. I think depending on sort of what direction the shyness goes in, there's going to be like more in particular advice I can give to kind of address that just on its own, because there is like shyness can come in so many different directions for dominance. But I think if it's something, just on a very basic level, like kind of having trouble verbalizing their kink desires and their goals, and that kind of being a roadblock. We talked about this last week as well a little bit, but not really from the dom perspective. I think if you can kind of start that process about being like, hey, this is a particular like kind of scene I'm really into, or a type of play I'm like really excited to try with you. Like, what do you feel about that? What are some things that you're interested in trying? And just kind of showing them that it's okay to like talk about that stuff, and that like you're kind of willing to take that first step, I think can really do a lot. If it's in the direction of like nervous about public play parties, I always think the best direction that you can do for this is to introduce them to the community outside of a play party first. So like going to a newbie orientation, going to a munch, going to a vendor fair, something where you can meet people or see the space where the dungeon is at, but not in a play setting. So there's not that pressure, it's not fully at like that 100 out of 100 level of like kink environment intensity. And I think if they get the opportunity to, meet people, I think for the most part, especially if you're sort of in the younger age bracket and you are going to parties where, the average age is between 18 and 35, like, again, a lot of people are nerdy, introverted, shy. And I think when you get to see the real community and you realize that, like, wow, this is like a cross section of so many different types of people, that'll help them understand that they're not really that alone, and hopefully they'll find people that make them more comfortable and feel more able to like embrace that part of who they are. And especially I think getting to meet another dom that's kind of similar to how they are in terms of style or being introverted. And I know a lot of doms and tops that are very introverted and shy, and they are very effective at what they do. And I don't think there's any sort of thing where you have to be extroverted to be a good dom. I think that's just sort of the stereotype we go off of, because we think that being dominant is being like brash and out there and aggressive and very like alpha, right? But it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. But yes, let me know if there's anything in particular that you're kind of worried about with the we have something from Kenzie. Don't know.
Kenzie donated $5. Love your content. It has been one of the main factors helping me get into kink and being able to share it with my partner. Thank you for being out here spreading kinky information in a professional manner.
Oh, thank you so much, Kenzie. You know what? I try my best. I'm definitely... I think I'm as close to a BDSM professional as you can really get. I mean, it's definitely people like Lee Harrington, Midori. I'm not published. I'm not an author yet. Maybe eventually we'll get to that level. What is YouTube doing? Sorry, there we go. Back to the stream. Thank you so much, Kenzie. All right. Next question. Oh my gosh, we're just getting so many good questions. You guys are awesome. Okay. What is the best way to be a service dom? Or what are the good signs of a good service dom? What do you like in a service dom? Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. So there's like 3 questions here. We love it though. We love the detail. So it's going to probably be very annoying. There's no best way to be a service dom other than what speaks to you and motivates you internally and like makes you feel good, obviously within the like boundaries of consent with your partner and finding somebody that also wants that same thing. So, there's kind of multiple different styles that you can go with for being a service dom. Some people go in the direction of being like very detailed, very exacting. They don't want any guesswork from their service sub. They want to be able to say, I want you to iron the laundry this exact way and fold my shirts this exact way, stack them, color order, in this part of my dresser drawer. I want you to iron my jeans and then hang them up this particular way. Like they want to be very, very detailed. And for them, the pleasure kind of comes from this place of having like that very like fine grain level of control and like being able to play with somebody that also like wants to meet those expectations, and almost sort of can also like to some extent sort of a side flavor to this is sort of like a military style, right? You can also kind of go in this direction where that like exacting nature goes sort of a twist in like this sort of military, like commanding officer, sort of direction where, they might just tell you to like, scrub the latrines with a toothbrush and like you're just gonna have to do that. I think you can also go in this sort of more like elegant, like refined direction. Of course, these things can also totally be combined as well. But I think another sort of way of looking at it, a lot of people take, you know, maybe another way of framing this, besides just sort of elegant and looking for, enjoying getting to do sort of high protocol events, right? Where like, you're getting your leather taken care of, you're getting served this like beautiful 4-course meal, you're having cigars and whiskey or coffee after dinner, and it's all done to this very sort of high standard, but it's done in a group setting. It's done in a group setting where it's almost part of it is almost kind of like showing off your service submissive skills and like being able to say, look how good my boy or girl is at serving these things correctly, or knowing exactly how many ice cubes I want with my scotch, or the exact temperature I want my coffee at. I think you can do it in a way where you take inspiration from particular eras in history. I think the two most common ones would be the 1950s household, which I've never made a video on, but it's on the list. Trust me, it's on the list. Like either from a 1950s household, people also take inspiration, I think most commonly from like English butlering or even like Victorian era protocol. Actually, the first year I went to Kink Fest, there was a whole class on Victorian inspired service. And if you want to go in that direction, generally service books, so learning how to set a dining table, learning about housekeeping, those things I think are generally recommended to service submissives to like learn a skill set. But I think also as a Dom, those things can be helpful so you kind of know what direction you want to go in. You can also go in, a very sort of low protocol direction where the service is on a much more reality everyday basis, right? Having somebody to return your phone calls for you, somebody that manages your schedule, somebody that answers your emails for you, almost having like a PA, like having a personal assistant that kind of manages your everyday affairs, so you have more time for your other hobbies, for relaxing, and for doing other kink stuff that you enjoy. I think you can also do it. See, I'm just giving so many ideas for like how to be a service now. I'm sorry, I'm rambling just so many. It's just like there's so many directions that you can do it in, and I think people have a very particular idea about like being a service human that does servicey things in BDSM is this exact way, and it's really, really not. It doesn't have to be any particular way. And again, there's also, other way of thinking about sort of how to approach being a service dom is, do you want this in a 24/7 relationship where you are always being provided service to some extent by a submissive partner? Or are you looking for those occasional weekend, monthly events where you get to do service stuff at a very high level, but in a contained space where it's not all the time? And that can also be sort of a difference for you. It sounds like based on your questions, you're probably going more in sort of that lifestyle direction. But, you can also sort of maybe have your service submission or dominance, I guess in this case, on a daily basis be on one level and have one intention, and then engage in other styles, for those, weekend events or special things or community stuff or whatever else. I think in terms of signs of a good service dom in particular, and of course there's many, many things that contribute to being a good dom, I think when it comes to a good service dom, knowing how to acknowledge service is very important for, I think, two main reasons. One, people are generally very uncomfortable and very unused to people doing nice things for them for no reason. Remember, for kink, there is no reason. It is because it reinforces the power exchange. It is because it is emotionally fulfilling for that person, because they, active service is like their love language, and them showing love to you looks like providing you service. So it's never for no reason. But I think people feel very awkward, and somebody does nice things for them, and like their brain goes like, and they're like, what am I doing? How do I respond to this? And so what ends up happening is oftentimes that service goes unacknowledged at all. And I think you can overdo it. Now, let's say you're doing service stuff with a little, and like for them, the praise is like what they want. They want to be told that they're like such an amazing big grown-up girl because like they folded laundry for you, because they folded socks, because they helped you unload the dishwasher, right? That might be a scenario where like overabundant praise makes sense because that's the flavor of the dynamic. But for most service like dynamics, there's a balance between overpraise and underpraise. And you don't want to dilute praise such that it has no value for the service submissive because you say they do a good job no matter what. But you don't want to say it so infrequently that they feel like they are basically unthanked help in the household, right? And that you don't really care or recognize their service. So I think having that balance of knowing how much to praise, and of course this is really going to be based on you negotiating with an individual partner, discovering what they want, what has worked for them in the past, what their ideal scenario is. This is going to be very much a back and forth dialogue with whoever you're doing service submission with. But whatever it turns out to be, I think being able to give praise and doing it enough, and especially if you do get into a lifestyle relationship with somebody where you kind of get very into things, I think being able to take time to remember that service is special and a core part of your dynamic is really important, because I think what can end up happening is, a service sub has this expectation, okay, I get the coffee in the morning, I do the laundry, I do the vacuuming, I pick up the groceries, I do all these things. And then at first, those things might be reinforced and praised and recognized. But then slowly over time, it stops being a BDSM thing and starts being like, oh, my partner is just the one that does the laundry. My partner is just the one that does XYZ thing. And so it can kind of lose that power exchange magic. And knowing how to maintain that life balance, again, the praise also, but then I think, introducing new protocols, knowing when to kind of shake things up to stay engaged for yourself and also help your partner stay engaged, introducing new protocols, knowing when to kind of let things go, when to kind of refresh whatever your rules are, your expectations are. And also, I think, again, kind of navigating those different levels that service can exist on. So, especially if you do get into the rut of like service just being monotonous every day and kind of doing the same thing all the time because that's just what you do, making sure you're also making space for that service to be acknowledged on a higher level, like in scenes as well, in a way that maybe it doesn't exist on an everyday life basis. As far as what I like in a service dom, I see, now I'm gotten through this and I'm wondering if maybe what you mean is a service top, which is like a top that just primarily tops for like the other person's pleasure. That is a totally different realm of kink, although the terms are very, very similar. I think as far as what I like in a service dom, I look for somebody that is able to essentially keep up their end of the bargain. So a lot of my advice has kind of hinted at this already. I find with service in particular, compared to pet play, impact play, bondage, latex, whatever other interests might be there, it is very easy for service to be left by the wayside and for the dom to promise certain things and then not execute on them, right? So, and that could be in terms of like a particular reward structure. That could be failing to hold you accountable because, I'm supposed to be the one that does the laundry every week, but I forgot this week and then my partner didn't say anything. I guess it doesn't matter. Like being able to stay present in the relationship, I think is like the most important thing. And I really, really try to look for people, not just with service, but I think, in various ways in all of my relationships, like I look for people that are motivated, that, maintain their contribution, that hold up their end of the bargain, and that know what they want, right? Like I want people that let me know how they want something. I like I like having some room to kind of leave things up to interpretation in terms of like how much time it takes to do something, what the best method is. But I do like being able to know what it is that my dominant like service partner is actually looking for from the experience. And I think that's the part of the equation that doms can leave out of the negotiation is like, what is their underlying goal? Why are they doing this? What is motivating for them about this? because I think that's a realm of compatibility that is really important to address. Because if for like a dom partner, the service is, really about kind of making you mess up on purpose by giving you things that are way too complicated to actually do, and then being able to punish you when you fail at meeting those impossible expectations, and essentially it's really just background flavor for a different scene. That's very different from somebody that like is wanting somebody to help them manage their life better on a daily basis. So I think knowing your motivations and being able to articulate them is also very important. And I think we have that expectation, fairly clearly for submissives, but we don't always kind of either allow doms, and doms don't necessarily always volunteer that information. They can kind of be a black box in that way. Anyways, that is a very long answer, but we did have 3 questions. Hopefully I answered the right question. And if I didn't, I guess I hope this was helpful for somebody. Great questions, though. Great questions. We love it. Why does somebody always ask me if I've done CBT or if I've stepped on somebody's balls? I don't. Do I look like a ball buster to people? Do I look like that's what my interest is?
Durwood 773 donated $5. Thanks for talking so in depth about it. I really like being served, and I guess I was really worried about how to reciprocate as a service dom. And you've given me a lot of good things to think about.
Great. Yes, super happy to help. Glad to help. I know it's like I especially love it when doms are like really wanting to know more and like how to be better at what they do. Because I think, if you look on YouTube, like 80% of all of the kink content is like geared primarily towards submissives. And I think dom education is very, very important. So very much happy to help answer that. And yeah, definitely lots to think about. And, definitely if you want to ask another question later or come back next week after you've had an opportunity to think about these things, we can definitely follow up on that. All right. Yeah, not a ball buster. So sorry. I'm a sadist, but I'm a sadist in the way where I specifically do not ever want to touch your genitals. I'm so sorry. Not going to be doing that anytime soon. Oh, okay, great question. Can a submissive serve a leadership role? So many angles to approach this from. So I think in a general sense, like, can somebody that is submissive in BDSM elsewhere in life also be a leader? Be a leader at work, be a leader in their other relationships, have a alpha, like, domineering whatever personality in everyday life? I think absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. It's funny because there's stereotypes that both correlate with that and also go against that, because there's a stereotype which comes from a study in the 80s that was primarily focused on like pro-doms and their male clients. Of course, seeing a pro-dom is very expensive, so typically the people that can afford to see them are like business leaders, people that have a lot of money, lawyers, doctors, people that have a lot of authority in their everyday life, because of course they make a lot of money doing those jobs. And so a lot of people had the assumption that like, oh, well, if you're a submissive, the reason why is because your everyday life is so stressful, you're so in control of everything all the time, that being a submissive allows you a space to unwind and listen to somebody else and follow their orders instead of having to always be the one that's in control of everything. I think that can totally be true. Absolutely can be part of somebody's motivations for kink. Not discounting that. I think the other stereotype on the opposite end of the spectrum is that, being submissive means that you have a subservient, meek personality. And if you are a real submissive, you will be subservient and meek and pliable to any dom that you run into, regardless of circumstance. And that's also not true. So I think that submissives can absolutely serve a leadership role. Now, if we're looking at relationships, like being a leader in a DS relationship, I don't think you can be the leader with like a capital L. I don't think you can be in charge of everything. But I think going back to the service thing that we just talked about, I think one way of giving service as a submissive can in some ways look like being a leader, right? Being the one to plan trips, to schedule, your dom's doctor's appointments, to pick where you're going for dinner, to be the one that drives places. And this is where intention really matters more so than the acts themselves, because all of those things could be done in dominant, leadery ways, right? They're the ones that are taking charge. They have the authority to make these decisions. However, it can also be done in a service way. Because, like, some doms don't want to be arsed. Like, they're like, I just want to have food, pick the restaurant. I hate driving. You should drive for me. Like, in those cases, it's about making your dominant's life easier, and you're making decisions, you're making choices, but ultimately those choices go back to making your partner happy and pleasing your dom. And so those can be leadery things, but they can also be submissive things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with submissives being leaders, whether that be in the relationship or outside the relationship. And I think also, there's a lot of complexity. Like, you could have somebody who's submissive but then also switches, and so they might be more of a leader dom type in other relationships. I have something from Davy Bones.
_Bones donated $5. When two first months told by a teacher if outed, she would be fired in. Googling found it is common for employers to fire BDSMs while affirmatively hiring, promoting LGBTs. I didn't choose to be a male sub-masochist. Why are we hated, fired in 2021 for our sexuality?
That's it's a really interesting problem, because I do know a couple of teachers in the kink community, like people that just generally work with kids, pediatricians, preschool teachers, nannies, pediatric nurses. Like, there's a lot of people that work with kids that are part of the BDSM community. And there is, here, I'll link it because it always comes up every live stream. There's a very wonderful website which has done a lot of work to advocate for BDSM people. And it's called the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. And one of the big things that they work on, obviously, is like employment discrimination, discrimination in family law. And this is something they definitely try and address. I think, there's a lot of harmful stereotypes out there about what kink means about a person. And so the assumption is that, like, I think it's not even really about kink. I think it's like shaming sexuality as a whole, and people being very, very afraid about crossing like sexuality and like working with children. Because I guess the idea is that, like, well, if you're married and you're having like pure monogamous heterosexual sex in a married relationship, like, you're healthy to be around children, you're normal. Whereas if your sexual behavior, if it is in fact sexual for you to be in BDSM, which people that are vanilla do not understand nor recognize, so they assume, one, that BDSM is automatically sexual, and they assume that if your behavior is in any way deviant, you could influence the children. And like, because oh my gosh, you're a teacher and you're kinky in your private life, oh my god, what if you're like subliminally like manipulating my children in some way? But there's a like, it's like, but it's so weird because I don't even necessarily, especially when it comes to teachers, I don't even know how much it's like strictly BDSM, because I know people, not personally, but like I've heard stories about people that are teachers that like get fired because it turns out that like 10 years ago when they were in college, they did like a bit of modeling and they did like a lingerie modeling photo shoot. Like, there's a lot of, I think, sex negativity in the education system to a very, very high degree, to where I don't think that it's really like about the BDSM. It's about like the idea of sexuality and like having a place where you're like having a deviant or a lascivious lifestyle, in the case of one time doing a lingerie photo shoot 10 years ago. I think there's just a lot of paranoia about that, and a lot of just heaven forbid that children are given any form of sex education outside of abstinence. Oh no, such a horrible crime. But it is interesting because I think, in the last couple decades, the LGBT community has made a lot of strides in terms of non-LGBT plus people, like seeing their relationships as not just a form of deviant sexuality. And I think that has sort of helped, people be able to be openly gay as teachers and not be fired because of that, because people understand that those relationships are more complex than just like deviant person doing deviant sex things for sex reasons. And so they've been able to kind of skip around the paranoia by being able to see it as more than just a sex thing. And I don't know if our society will reasonably get to that point on a large scale with kink anytime soon. Because obviously, sex can be a big part of kink for some people. It is something that, I wouldn't encourage minors to engage in BDSM. So it's a very complex issue. I don't think it's something that's easily boiled down, but I think, like I linked earlier, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom has been doing a lot of work to help with issues of employment discrimination in terms of family law. I think that's really, really helpful. And I do know people that they've never been told that they were fired because they were kinky, but the implication is that an employer found out about it and that's the reason they were fired. I know 2 people that happened to, because otherwise, they had good performance reviews, they were on time, no complaints with coworkers or customers or anything. It was just, suddenly, you're not a good cultural fit for the company, like out of nowhere, like 5 years into being an employee. So it definitely does happen. And it's definitely a very difficult thing to navigate, and it is a very real thing. But I think we are making at least some strides in that direction. So getting back to the poly advice question from earlier, Storm. I don't know if this is Storm felt witch or Storm felt twitch. I'm assuming it's Storm felt witch. Synchronize your fucking digital calendar, or your entire polycule will dematerialize into nuclear radiation and mauve glitter. Mauve, mauve, mauve. That's the word. I know how to say English words for colors. This is my first language. I think that's a very good point, especially if you have a fairly robust polycule. The more people that are in it, the harder it is to schedule things, and the more that you get in sync on that, the easier it will be, for sure. Where can I find monogamous people in the community? Gosh, this comes up whenever we talk about poly, isn't it? Comes up every time. So, a few things, my beautiful little chickens, my beautiful little tomatoes. The kink community is not just poly people. The reason why you see more poly people doing public BDSM is most monogamous people are utterly terrified of the idea of public BDSM, because seeing people that are not their partners do sexual things, or looking at another person doing something sexual, is considered a form of cheating. And so a lot of monogamous people do not even get to the point of broaching the subject of public BDSM, because the very idea of it itself is an affront to the idea of monogamy. So, the public BDSM community, I would certainly say, skews more poly than the general populace. So, like, if 2% of the general populace is full polyamorous, then 30% of the kink community is. It's definitely a much higher percentage. I think because of how much more common it is, people have this perception that now, oh my gosh, everybody's doing it. In the same way that people have the idea that, like, oh my gosh, all these Zoomers are trans now. Being trans is a trend, and it's not. It's just that, like, it's safer to be open about it. And certainly in the kink community, it's much safer to be out as poly than it is in everyday life, because on the subject we just talked about, poly people are very much discriminated against in terms of, workplaces, divorce court, family law. All of that definitely affects polyamorous people as well. And so it's a lot more, troublesome to be out in everyday life than it is to be in the kink community. But, I would say that the majority of people in the kink community by far are still monogamous. And you also have to define what monogamous means to you, because different people have different definitions. For some people, if you look at pornography of another person, that's considered cheating. For other people, you can have non-sexual BDSM play with somebody, and that's not considered a violation of monogamy. So where you fall in that spectrum of defining monogamy, I would say the majority of people that are monogamous, that are in the kink community, are at least comfortable going to munches and or playing with people in a non-sexual capacity. Because if somebody is monogamous and is not comfortable with those things, the only reason they would be part of the kink community is to find somebody to be a partner, and then they leave. That is what happens. So if you are looking for somebody that is monogamous and is also kinky, you can certainly find people. There's not like monogamous only BDSM events, but just be open about that being your relationship preference when you're meeting people. And, even when people are poly in the kink community, usually what that means is I have one exclusive sexual romantic partner, but maybe I casually, have oral or, play with other people. Like I have 5 play partners, but I have one like real, like full life partner. The majority of people that are poly in the kink community, I would personally call that generally non-monogamous, not necessarily polyamory. But you don't generally get a lot of people that are like, I have a girlfriend and my girlfriend has a boyfriend and her boyfriend has a fiance. And like, you don't generally get those like very intertwined relationships, I think, nearly as much as people are imagining. It usually exists somewhere on the very casual non-monogamous spectrum. But if you are looking for very strict monogamy, certainly I think that's the majority of people that do BDSM, but not necessarily people that go to play parties and events, because there is no reason to, and it is generally uncomfortable when you are monogamous and partnered to see your partner oogling somebody else doing a BDSM scene, because, oh God, the jealousy. There's no management of it. No jealousy management. Anyways, moving on. Next question. Oh my God. Apparently someone used my debit card to order a buffet on Postmates. The weirdest things that people do with stolen credit cards. Hopefully you can get that charged. I personally do not like Postmates at all, so I'm super sorry. But yeah, Postmates. Not a fan. Okay, great question. Do you think it's better to stay single after a contract is concluded? Does it depend on your personality? Is it better to jump right back into the ring? I mean, I think to some extent it does depend on your personality, because, some people are just naturally going to have a longer mourning process for a relationship than others. I think more so than that, it depends on the reason for the breakup and the length of the relationship. I think the harder the breakup and the longer the relationship, I think the more time naturally you're going to need to heal from that. If it was something where, you dated for 6 months, your contract naturally came to a conclusion, you decided you didn't want to keep going with it, you weren't actually that compatible, and you both end the relationship under the terms that you originally talked about ending the relationship under, and that was all there was to it. There wasn't any animosity, there wasn't cheating, anything like that. It was just a natural end of the relationship. I think under those circumstances, maybe it doesn't make sense to be completely celibate for 6 months to like recover from that, because that would probably be a little bit too much. But if you were in a decade-long relationship where you got married and had kids, and then they slowly became abusive over time, and they left you with horrific psychological and physical scars from your relationship, obviously that's gonna take a lot longer to heal than the first example would. And most things are going to be somewhere kind of in between on the spectrum there. But I think regardless, I do think it is a good idea to be single, or at least not add any additional relationships after another relationship has ended, because you do not inadvertently want to try to use somebody to fill the gaping wound in your heart. Do not use somebody as field dressing. Like that's not fair to them. That could impact your ability to really have a genuinely good relationship, because you need to have that space to mourn and grieve that relationship. And I mean grieve in like a very real way, not like burying it with new relationships, not trying to ignore it and tell yourself that you're really just fine. Like you have to go through the grief process, and ignoring it, trying to get around it, trying to do whatever you can to ignore it, avoid it, run away from it, is eventually going to catch up with you. And so I think if you can really sit there and like acknowledge the ways that the relationship worked and it didn't work, what did you learn from it? What would you want to do differently going forward? And really taking that time for reflection and grief, that will prepare you to get into a relationship in the future. And I think the key to knowing when to re-engage is, when do you feel like you've fully done that reflection? When can you look back on it and not feel only 10,000 ice shards in your heart from like how painful it was? I think when you can get to that point where you can look back on it and reflect on it in a calm manner, or at least as calm, relevant to, like, obviously if somebody horrifically abused you for years, like, you're not going to be able to look back on that necessarily and go, everything is now something I have come to terms with and I'm at peace with. That's not going to happen in all scenarios, but at least not have it be at maximum full pain anymore. I don't think that it's a good idea to jump back in the ring. However, this does not mean you shouldn't be part of your local BDSM community still. I think if you want to hang out with friends at a play party, you want to be able to still go to munches, you want to go to your regular Zoom call classes, discussion groups, whatever it is you have going on, stay engaged. Stay engaged with your hobbies, stay engaged with your friends, your community. That is what those support networks are there for. And I think if you can really rely on those and take faith in those and comfort in those, that will also help you understand that you are like a full, whole person. You don't need that relationship or a dom in general or a submissive in general to be a full, whole, complete person. And I think if you can get to the point where you feel comfortable, acknowledging that, like, I am a whole, real, complete person, and I don't need somebody else to make me feel fulfilled, that I think is a really powerful, important step. Because I think even people that haven't gone through a breakup are not able to do that. Like, they aren't able to recognize that they have value and are interesting, good people, even when they aren't in a relationship. And that's something I think a lot of us have a lot of trouble getting through. Hopefully that helped answer your question. I would really love to get some water. So I'm going to get some water. I'll be back, toot sweet, and continue to ask questions. We do have about 40-ish minutes left, so keep that in mind. And if you haven't asked a question yet, please do. I will be back in just a minute. We are back. I have liquids to sustain me while I talk. I am permanently dehydrated. I should drink more water. Please send help. How to find the perfect femdom. Vet appropriately and ask lots of questions. That's the short answer. That's the short answer. If you haven't already, could you discuss introducing BDSM to a partner who has only been vanilla but is interested in the community? I do have videos, you should find them linked in the FAQ below, where I have talked about like introducing BDSM to partners, and there's lots of good books about that as well if you want help in that direction. I cannot remember the names of the books at the minute, but they are out there if you look on Amazon. But I have talked about it. But if you have a particular like thing that you're kind of worried about with introducing BDSM to a partner, like something maybe you're nervous about, I can definitely help with that. I just would, need more specifics on that one. Do you have any advice for a self-collaring, non-binary, femme-presenting person who's dom-leaning, approaching someone at a fetish club? I'm assuming you mean that in the sense of like, the super chat. I don't think the super chat is going to read itself. Wait, you are a sadist? Interesting. Do tell. Also doing subs who are in leadership community positions, helping run organized kink groups. Yes, definitely. You can definitely be a leader in the BDSM community as well. So many events and organizations are actually spearheaded by submissives and slaves. So absolutely. I will talk about me being a sadist in a minute because people always seem to miss that. And I feel like I telegraph that like in my videos. How do you think I have so many ideas for punishments? This doesn't come out of nowhere. The sadism does not grow on trees. Okay, so switch, self-collared, dom-leaning person wants to approach human at fetish club. Y'all, I try to hide it. I'm very introverted. I'm really not good at talking to people. I'm very much like a Venus flytrap of a human being where I'm like, I will sit here and attempt to look interesting and listen to conversation and hope that somebody says something to me because I do not know what else to do. But I think, whenever it comes to approaching somebody, I think if you... It's interesting because I don't know if you mean for like a friendship, for a scene, for just talking to a person as maybe a friend. Really depends, I think, on your intention a little bit. But I think if you approach them, I think the best technique in general is to just approach them with like genuine curiosity without like a particular end goal in mind, right? I think if you are trying to approach people because, I want to find a play partner, I need to find somebody to play with, I need to have a new friend. I think if you just, if you come in with too many expectations, what ends up happening is you read into things that aren't really there, right? Because you have hope for like a particular outcome. And I think if you just allow yourself to kind of treat it as an opportunity to like evaluate, do we actually sync up? Do we have very much in common? Do I like their energy? Then you can kind of determine more accurately like where they would really fit into your life in reality. But honestly, like if I'm ever trying to approach somebody, I usually start off with some kind of like compliment. If I like something that they are wearing, if they're already in a conversation, like it's a group conversation, I try to naturally fit into like whatever's going on in the conversation. I would never recommend being very forward about things. Like, don't bring up anything too sexual. Don't bring up anything that's like too, like, if you know. Don't be creepy. Don't be creepy. That's really the key. If you mean it in the sense that like you saw somebody play and you love to do a scene with them, I think as a submissive, I do appreciate it. Like if there is that kind of intention up front, and they specifically looking to play, I do think that it is a good idea to be upfront with that and just say it like it is, right? Be like, wow, I really liked it when I got to see your scene with so-and-so. It looked like it was a really great experience. Would you be interested in doing pickup play sometime? Would you be interested in talking about doing a scene? And just start off the conversation, if that's what's in mind, let them know what's up. Otherwise, I think just like being casual, bringing up something that's already in conversation, try to find something, with their outfit or something they're doing, or you can start a conversation off of. But yeah, it's a very hard process. It's a hard process. Have you heard of Kimbaku? How is it different from Shibari? Well, gee, I don't know. It's not like I own this shirt that was made by a famous Shibari rigger or anything. So in a substantially meaningful way in North America, I do not think that there is really any difference between saying Shibari and Kimbaku. I think the intention is that, like, what is it that people say? I feel like people steer like Kimbaku as like being, I'm just gonna Google Kimbaku versus Shibari. Never listen to anything that Osada Steve has to say. That's a real piece of work. Yeah, like generally Kimbaku, like if people are like real ass like Japanese weeb rope snobs, like usually Kimbaku has this connotation of like deep connection and like sensuality and sexuality connected with it. But I don't know if there's like really much of a difference between the two in Japan in terms of actual style, but I would say in the West, like a very, 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 like I've been to tons of rope conferences, I've been to tons of classes, like the term Kinbaku isn't really widely used, and I don't really see people actively trying to make a distinction, because like if what you want is like a connective sensual scene, you negotiate for that. You say, I want a connective sensual rope bondage scene. And if you want something that's going to be really intense and masochistic, you say, I want a really intense masochistic scene. There you go, bingo, bango, bongo. Yeah, let me see. What is Shibari versus Kinbaku? It is important to remember, just as the rest of the world, Japanese have different opinions on what is and which is the best term to use, not only for what Shibari or Kinbaku is, but other terms like Nawashi, Bakushi, Nawaza, Yakuwaza, etc. Asada Steve and Hajime Kanoko have broadly the same opinion that Shibari is bondage tying and that Kinbaku is Shibari plus emotional connection. Arisugo seems to use some words interchangeably on his own site, referring to himself as both a Shibari master, a Nawashi, and a Kimbakushi? I don't know what the emphasis would be on that phrase. You are invited to learn Shibari at his Kinbaku workshops. Others recognize Japanese names prefer one or other to some extent. This does not, however, mean that one is valid and the other is not. They are all valid. Similarly, with floor work that Osada Steve will likely refer to as Nuwaza, Yukimura-san may or may not refer to as Nuwaza, and Arisugo may refer to floor work as Yukiwaza. So, very complicated, lots of Japanese flippity flam that as English speakers, honestly, we don't think we have any really problems messing with. So I think if you wanted to use the term Kinbaku to mean like rigging with a particular emotional connection to it, I personally don't see that distinction is very useful. The thing I've often heard on FetLife, which I quite enjoy, is that all rope is connective. And so there's not really a meaningful difference. And that's like, honestly, hot controversial opinion time. This is why I don't talk about like soft doms, is I don't like, all rope is to some extent connective. So I don't think there's really much to be gained by saying non-connective rope versus connective rope, or like emotional rope versus non-emotional rope. Like that's, to some extent, those things are always going to be a factor. And so, yeah, I mean, there is technically a linguistical difference in the definition and origin of these two terms, in practice in the North American kink scene, 98% of the time, I have heard people say rope bondage or shibari. I very, very, very rarely, I don't think I've ever heard somebody use the term kinbaku in like an actual like conversation class setting. Like pretty much never. And I've taken for rope bondage, you know, and I've gone all over the country for that stuff, whether it be where I live here, California, Chicago, Midwest. Like I don't think I've ever heard somebody actually use the term kinbaku. In writing on FetLife, yes. In real life, no. And so I think if what you're looking for is a concise word to explain what you want from an experience, talk about that during negotiation, because there is no one set definition for these things. And I think if that was what you're looking for from these terms, they don't really do that. If using a leash in public or even handcuffing somebody is inappropriate, how would you control a sub or slave in public? A harness? If your submissive is so bratty that they don't understand to not publicly display their kink to the point where they would need to be physically restrained in public, I question that person's ethical integrity and like ability to have control over their own behavior. Because like I don't think your brattiness in public should ever get to the point where like actual physical restraint in public that would be inappropriate is required. I think something that, you know, if you are kind of wanting to check your submissive in public, like using subtle hand signals, sending them a text message, like things like that, or like even just like really strong glowering eye contact to like express your displeasure and be like, you're going to get punished for this later, that should be sufficient. And if you feel like you need more than that to control your submissive in public, there is something either going wrong with your approach or their ability to understand the boundaries of their behavior in public. Oh, thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, Dirty Dogs. Oh, that reminds me. Last question about me being a sadist. Yes, I am a sadist. I actually have a whole video. I have talked about this before, and I am a sadist. Yep. It's been a thing for a while. I have, in fact, inflicted pain on other human beings. Crazy, I know. How do you meet people in the BDSM community if you hate talking to new people? Lurk. Go to munches and listen to people. Go to play parties and watch. Just kind of ingratiate yourself with the general community, and eventually you will get comfortable, and then you will hopefully not hate meeting new people so much when you are already familiar with them. Ooh, very exciting. I'm late to this stream, but I wanted to say that since your stream on non-monogamy, I've planned to move in with one of my partners as soon as I can, and I'm so excited for it. Congrats, Ace Overlord. That's awesome. Super cool. Did you watch The Falcon and the Snowman? Great movie. There's a line in there, the moment you took money, you become a professional. I have not seen that movie. Is that kink related? Is it just a movie? I really don't watch movies, so chances are the answer is no, if that's the question. How long does vetting take? Also, why is it people in FetLife just like you meet at their house after like 3 sentences? I mean, FetLife is certainly a unique experience. You know what's funny? I got this really funny comment the other day that was just like, I was born and raised in the leather community. I've been a leather master for 16 years, and in my experience, vetting should take no less than 3 months. And it's like, it depends entirely what you're vetting somebody for. Like, yeah, if you're trying to find a lifelong MS relationship where somebody's going to have your bank account details, yeah, that should probably take a while. But if all you want to do is a light spanking with somebody at a BDSM public play party, like, I don't think it takes 3 months to figure out whether or not you're going to be compatible. That seems a little excessive. So personally for me, it depends on if I have met somebody in public or not, or if if I've seen them play, basically. If I've seen them play in public, then for me, the vetting process, like basically the point from like when I start talking to them versus when a scene happens is like a week or 2 weeks, depending on what exactly it is that I want to do, their experience level, if my friends know them or not, things like that. Typically, it takes about a week or 2. And I think that if you are trying to figure out if you want to play with somebody that you haven't seen play before, I think that should take, honestly, it could probably even take a similar amount of time, maybe like 2 weeks, something like that. Because I'm thinking if you're talking over FetLife and you're looking up references and you're also doing like the negotiation process, like I think the vetting process for somebody that you haven't seen play in public before, like it doesn't necessarily have to be longer. I think it's more important that like you be very particular for exactly what it is you're negotiating and like where you're doing it and for how long. Because like if I've played with somebody, if I'm going to play with somebody that I've seen in public before, like I'm going to be a little bit more open with my negotiations. I'm going to be a little bit more willing to, do more things and play for longer and just kind of have more of a real scene, basically. Whereas if it's like a stranger online or like somebody that I've kind of seen around but not really seen them play before, then that's going to take longer and I'm going to be much more restrained with how I go about the scene, right? It's probably going to be shorter. It's probably going to be like thoroughly inside all of my limits, like not really taking any risk as far as that's concerned. It's going to have to be in public. Absolutely going to have to be in a public place. Going to need to have people there that I can trust to watch my back for sure. And then sort of you basically kind of set it up till there's like a trial scene essentially to see if you're compatible. And then you go into like actually having like a real scene where you've actually sort of been able to demonstrate for yourself with you as sort of the practice dummy, see how they actually play and kind of establish that compatibility. I don't think that like 3 sentences is enough time. I don't think 3 months is necessarily required. And it's also going to be based off your own risk profile. Like, does this person have experience in kink in general? What is their profile like? Can you easily contact ex-partners, current play partners? What's their reputation in a local community? Do they go to local events? Like all of those questions I think are also going to be important things to ask about. Is it wrong if the sub is always the one asking to do scenes? My sir says he prefers for me to ask since, quote, he never knows when I want to. But I always thought doms were supposed to start scenes, question mark. I think that it could be wrong in the sense that it indicates that the dom might be lazy or like reluctant about doing BDSM or really isn't into that much. I think no matter whether it's the dom or the submissive, unless you have specific protocol to the contrary, I think if either partner is always the one to approach for play and the other partner never does, I think that can be a little bit of a red flag for compatibility issues in the relationship in terms of like liking the same stuff, just being on the same page communication wise with your partner. I think that can definitely be a red flag. I think, it sounds like he never knows when I want to. I feel like that's such an easy thing to resolve. Like, I just feels like they're not really willing to like take a risk for rejection. Like, it sounds like they're very rejection sensitive. And my interpretation of that is like they don't want to be told no, so they don't ask. But I think it's super easy. Like if you should be doing that anyways. Like if you want to do a scene with somebody, you say, "Hey, we'd love to play tonight. How are you feeling?" And then they can either say, "Yeah, I'm into that," or "No, I'm not." That's like the most minor level of rejection I could physically imagine happening in the BDSM context. And I think as a dom, they should probably be a little bit more comfortable with being able to hear you say no. So, I don't think it should always be that dom start scenes. I think if you have protocol that says that, sure, you can negotiate for that. But I don't think as a blanket statement, it's that Dom should always start scenes. And I think there's maybe some kind of underlying confidence issue, or just not really being willing to take a risk of being rejected, or maybe they're not being honest. Like, right, maybe the excuse is that they don't ever know when you want to do something. Because clearly it sounds like you're the one who's asking to do scenes. So, like, if you were paying attention, you could probably pick up on some patterns there. But maybe what they really feel is something different. Like, they aren't feeling as enthusiastic about BDSM. They're worried they're not dom enough for you. They feel like they can't play heavy enough. Like, it could be for a million other reasons. If they're being truthful, that's great. But I think there could also be a layer potentially of like, they're not really telling you what the issue is, and they're just saying it's because they don't know when you want to do something. But I think it's important. Like, honestly, I would probably say directly, I would be like, hey, I feel like I'm always the one to ask for scenes. This makes me feel worried that maybe like I'm more invested in the relationship than you are, and I would really appreciate it if you would take a chance and ask me if I would want to do a scene, and I'll always be honest with you about when I feel ready for it or not. And it's, if I say no, it's not because I don't like you, it's not because I don't feel inspired by BDSM anymore. It's just, what I have time for, and how I'm genuinely feeling. And if they're not willing to like take that minute level of rejection of hearing you say no when you're not like in a mental headspace to do a scene, like, if they can't even hear no to a scene and they don't want to take that level of risk, like, it's going to be real fucking difficult to like have meaningful power exchange if that's like kind of the level of confidence you're working with, I feel for you. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, like Laura said, I think as long as the people involved are fine with it, it doesn't matter who initiates. It can be a lot of pressure to expect doms to always initiate. Yeah, I think you have to have a balance of those expectations. I don't think it should flip from like, you doing everything to the dom doing everything, but I think finding a happy medium is important. Whether that ends up being 70-30, 50-50, just something. I think, I think to some extent it is kind of like, you want the reassurance that they also want to do BDSM and want to do BDSM with you. And if you're always the one asking, like, that's going to bring up a lot of doubt for sure. At least it can. Having a wonderful start to the weekend with tonight's stream. Oh, glad to hear that, Lucario. It just occurred to me, what do you think of mixing service submission and pet play? Think of a service animal scenario. I think that's great. I think you should absolutely do that. One of the first people I ever did BDSM with, one of the first people I did power exchange or pet play with was actually a type 1 diabetic. And so like part of my kind of like, it wasn't really a formal thing, but we joked about it that I was his service animal because he had an insulin pump, and so like I would help him remember to like if he was like showing symptoms of like high or low blood sugar, like I would remind him to check his blood sugar levels. I would like fetch him stuff if he needed sugar, other things like that. I would help, but that wasn't really like a formal actual thing. It was just like an inside joke because we did pet play and power exchange, that like, oh, that's like your service, you're like my service animal. But you can totally do that. I think that's fine. And yeah, totally. I have definitely seen people mix that before. Okay, so follow up on the last question. I don't always expect him to ask for scenes, but the thing is that he never does. I've asked him to, but again, he says he wants me to. It feels like he doesn't actually want to unless I ask. Yeah, that definitely sounds like he's very. Sorry, I'm fiddling with my camera lens. Just always fiddling with something. Yeah, that definitely sounds like there's maybe some kind of sensitivity to rejection going on, or just some kind of reluctance to do BDSM in general. That's like I'm sorry, dude, that's like a really shit situation to be in, because like you've made it clear that you want him to also ask occasionally, and then he doesn't. Yeah, that's hard. That's super hard. I mean, at that point, I think you have to be clear about like what's at stake, frankly. Like, it's like if you are always like having to be the one that asks every single time. Like, that's going to be damaging to your kink relationship at some point. Maybe he would feel more comfortable if there was like pre-planned stuff. Like if you had like a specific play party date night thing, maybe that would make him more comfortable. But then again, it's kind of just removing the burden. Like it's just removing his responsibility. And I don't necessarily know how productive that will be in the long run, you know? All right, we got 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left. Okay, bakers, you have 10 minutes remaining to complete your brownies. All right, we got 10 minutes left, so if you haven't asked your question, please do now. I am definitely not going to get to every question this week, so I do apologize. But if you haven't already, or if I've missed yours, definitely feel free to ask it again. All right. Good. Promise I'm not tired. I don't know where that came from. We're talking about giving advice. We love giving advice. That's super great. Oh, yeah. Good point. Good girl Becca said, have you considered maybe setting up a signal or something that you could leave out for him to see that lets him know you're interested in doing a scene? Then he could initiate comfortably. Yeah, that's also a really, really good technique. But then they actually has to like listen to the signal. And then again, that is like kind of a roundabout way of like, it's really kind of like you're asking, but it's like hidden a little bit. So I don't necessarily know that fully solves the problem, but that at least can feel a little bit less burdenous than being the one that has to initiate the conversation and like the talking aspect of it, right? Like literally you could just have like if you live together and you have like a fridge, you could literally have like like this is the funniest idea I've ever come up with. So you know how they have those magnets you can use to tell whether or not the dishes in the dishwasher are clean or dirty? If you don't feel like doing a scene that day, you have it to clean, and when you do feel like doing a scene, you have it to dirty. That's what you do. That's the key. I think that's a great idea. That's the best idea I've ever come up with. It's very funny. I am funny. I entertain myself. All right. Any advice for a couple trying out BDSM for the first time who are both switchy but lean slab? The eternal switch problem. It is very rare that you would ever find a switch partnership where one of you always feels dom when the other one feels sub, and vice versa. It's definitely a fine line to walk. I would say that you are in the most common scenario, which is you're both switches and you both lean submissive. You can kind of navigate around like being willing to dom because it makes your partner happy and kind of playing out that like service top aspect. I would look into service topping and seeing if that's something that's like an idea that appeals to you. But I think that communication is always, especially like now, like gonna really be key. Like you got to be honest about like, are you feeling more submissive or dominant? Like what helps you get more into that role? And especially if your partner is really, really feeling submissive and you're not really feeling super dom, like what can you use to help you like get more in that headspace? I think, having outside play partners can definitely be an option. I think almost everyone I know that's a switch has outside play partners because that inherent mismatch where both people lean more towards submissive or both lean towards dom, in order to really feel like, you're not getting taken advantage of, you're getting your needs met, all of that, I think, having an outside relationship or outside relationships where you can get those needs met without having to burden your partner with, kind of just playing along with things for your sake, more or less, I think that can be really helpful. I don't know if that's an option for you or not, but I think that's how most switches I know like eventually end up dealing with that. Is it's just a lot of pressure on a relationship, to have to act dominant when you really feel submissive to like make your partner happy. That's definitely a very precarious place to be in, I guess is what I would say. So I feel for you on that one for sure. It's a very difficult line to watch, to walk. But I think the more you can be in tune with like your triggers for what makes you feel submissive or dominant, and kind of cultivating that in a way where where you can indicate to each other when you're feeling more submissive or dominant, and find ways to help you feel more dominant when your partner's feeling more submissive if they need that side to be fulfilled. That's going to be really helpful. If you missed my answer, you can also rewind, and the streams are available for replay. So if you ever miss anything that I say, 98% of the time, the streams are available afterwards. Sometimes I decide I hate it and I delete it, but most of the time they stick around. Most of the time they stick around. Even though you're not a little yourself, oh God, we're going to end on a real controversial note here, aren't we? Even though you're not a little yourself, do you have anything you want to say about underage little/age regressors? Yes, I have things that I want to say. I know that I cannot stop teenagers from doing BDSM, because half the time if you're kinky, you don't even realize that what you're doing was BDSM. Like when I was in high school, my boyfriend and I exchanged dog collars, and like we didn't get that was like a kinky thing that we were doing. It just like felt like really hot and emotionally connective to like wear collars, and it felt good. We didn't realize it was a kink thing. I think teenagers are going to experiment. I think I don't have to allow them into my space on my YouTube channel. I do not encourage them to be part of the local community, lie about their age, make a FetLife account. I never ever encourage that. And I always try to tell people to wait, because I genuinely believe it is better for your psychological development to wait until you are an adult before you engage in BDSM. I know they're going to do it anyways. My hope is always that they do it with other peers, other teenagers, not online, on fucking TikTok or whatever. Dear God, no. Do not attract predators to your inbox, because functionally that's what you're doing if you're like publicly a minor doing BDSM stuff, is like predators are like, great, a 15-year-old that thinks they like kink. That is like literally my ideal victim that's not going to know what they don't know yet. So I always think that anyone that is going to do it anyways, they should be really, really, really cautious on it. I never encourage people that are underage to engage in BDSM, while also acknowledging that they're going to do it anyways, because that's what teenagers do. They do not listen to the rules, even when it is in their own best interest as well as the best interest of others. So I am not under the illusion that I can stop it from happening. I just try to at least quarantine the adult parts of kink from like minors that are faffing about. As far as age regressors are concerned, I don't know if hate is too strong of a word. I really hate it when safe for work age regressors take every other aspect of BDSM, the titles, the clothing, shopping from the same kink stores, using all the same accoutrements, all the same terminology, all the same things, and then say, well, mine's okay because it's safe for work to cope with my trauma, and so I have permission to act like a baby. And all of these other freaky weirdos that do it for gross sexual reasons, they're actually bad people. But I'm good because I have a valid reason to do it, and actually this is like a psychological like coping skill that I have. Not all coping skills are healthy coping skills. Stop trying to use BDSM to avoid going to therapy, Jesus Christ. My interactions with people that are like part of the safe for work age regress space has always been really, really negative, because it just seemed like They wanted to do kink, but they wanted an excuse to do it underage. They wanted an excuse to not have to deal with things like limits and boundaries and negotiations. They wanted to be able to basically not feel like a kinky weirdo freak. And so they took all the things they liked, completely hollowed out anything related to BDSM except for the aesthetic things they liked about it, and then went, no, mine's okay now because it's not gross and sexual and bad. Mine is good and is for a coping. And I get that. I still, to this day, I get comments on my videos on like on Littles or Middles or like the Blair White video of people that are like, well, actually, you should know this thing called age regression. And so actually, like, pretending to be a younger age than yourself isn't always a sexual BDSM thing. And I'm like, I literally watched you people invent this on Tumblr like 10 years ago. So please, I wasn't literally 10 years ago because I wasn't in the community then, but like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I literally watched people on the internet invent this out of kink spaces that they found disgusting. So please, if you're trying to tell me that this somehow existed as a community 20 years ago, you need to stop because you're wrong. Yeah, it's very, I have a lot of pains about it, and I never want to yuck anybody's yum, but it's like, maybe, if the only thing that you're doing to deal with your trauma is acting like a baby and having a caregiver take care of you, maybe there's like other ways that you could be addressing this, as far as I know. And this is funny because people will pull this up. They'll be like, well, you know, in DID systems, there can, like, one of the types can be a little, or like, you know, age regression is demonstrated in this like part of the DSM or whatever. And I'm like, just because people regress to a different age as part of a dissociative disorder doesn't mean that it's like a healthy coping skill that like therapists encourage you to do. Like, self-harm is also a coping skill, but like most therapists aren't going to be like, well, you see, you know, causing yourself permanent scars across your body is like a coping skill. So like, there's no reason I should ever interfere with that, and there's no reason you should ever do anything else to ever develop any other form of coping. Like, that's really not something that people do. They accept it for sure. I think definitely, based on, the Thrive conference I went to, I think people are kind of learning how to have a more positive approach to these things instead of just saying they're bad and negative and never do them. And I'm not trying to say that either. I would never shame anybody for their coping skills. What I am saying is that it is perhaps problematic to paint all coping skills as equally healthy and something that is equally something we should maintain across the lifespan. Usually there are other things that are going to be a little bit, I don't know, better is the right word, but maybe would be more conducive to working through things, I guess is what I would say. I thought age regression was used in therapy. See, that's what people say, like, oh, age regression is used in therapy. Technically, there are some therapeutic modalities in which age regression is part of it. The closest thing that I know that modern psychologists actually practice is something called lifespan integration, which is where you basically talk to your like infant self and you tell your infant self like sort of the trajectory of your life and talk about, what things you did when you were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., until like all the way up through your life in order to form. It's like defragging your brain basically about like your life experiences. That's the closest thing I'm aware of that like actual mainstream therapists and psychologists and counselors practice. I have never, and the only people I ever hear that say age regression is done in therapy are people that do age regression. I've never actually seen anything that actually evidences like actual like practicing therapists really using age regression as like a regular part of their practice in the way that a safer work age regressors say that it happens. Come for the wargaming community. Stay for the rants. Listen, that's gonna be like what happens. I get ranty. I have opinions. They're not always the correct opinions. I'm certainly welcome to be corrected, but I do feel strongly about that one, and I'm willing to accept I am perhaps butthurt a little bit about that one, because I really don't like when people say that their community is better, even though it's exactly the same as kink, and then say that BDSM is disgusting because it involves sex sometimes. Like, can we not please with like the sex negativity? It's really not productive. Really not productive. Yeah, that's another really great point. Also, are you a therapist? Just because professionals do it doesn't mean it's a good idea for you to try. Yeah, like, that's also another thing. Like, generally speaking, like, even if therapists do it, it's in a very controlled setting with like lots of training and certifications. Like, you're probably not going to be given all the information necessary to be able to do that in like a completely like conductive way. It just feels very excuse based. I feel like that's my problem with it. It just feels like people have come up with a very robust set of excuses for getting to do a thing that they want without having to call it BDSM. And it wasn't like they originally did it for XYZ reason. They retroactively found things to justify it to make it sound legitimate. And then other teenagers just repeated it into infinity. And now it sounds like it's a real thing, which I don't think was originally intended to be that way, because I was there when it was being developed on Tumblr and Instagram. I saw this shit happening first person, and it very much has always seemed like retroactive justification as opposed to a legitimate progressive organization of thoughts that like make sense. I don't know. Anyways, I've been talking for 2 hours. I'm probably feeling a little bit loopy. All right, I feel like that's probably it. I'm just going to scroll down real quick because I want to make sure I'm seeing kind of the last bit of this conversation. Okay, well, I think that's going to be it for tonight. We're a bit past 8 o'clock, and I have Amazon, Whole Foods, groceries arriving at some point in the next wee bit. So I should probably be around for that shows up on my doorstep. All right. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I feel like we got to a ton of like really good questions today. We went over a lot of stuff. This is a ton of fun. If you guys want to make sure to see this again in the future, we do this every Friday at 6 p.m. and we go for 2 hours. So make sure you have that notification bell turned on to all so you don't miss it. I do try to schedule these at least like a couple hours in advance, so you can set a reminder notification for this live stream link in particular. But if you want to make sure to not miss any live streams, future videos, that's the best thing to do. And also, if you want to help other people find this live stream in the future, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I don't normally ask for people to thumbs up things on videos, but it seems like it does actually help my live streams and like help boost my live streams to be suggested to people and actually go out in those notifications. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry that I didn't get to every question, but if I missed yours, you can always ask next time. Ask next time. Ta-da. Tumbling out the end there with my words. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Sorry. One more thing. Tomorrow on Patreon, we are going to be watching S&M Sally. So if you're on Patreon, any dollar level, any tier, we are going to be watching S&M Sally. It's going to be a really fun time. Hopefully, I will see you guys there. If not, thank you so much. And I will talk to you all again very soon. Bye.